Family of the nations. Here's the table of the nations, Genesis 10. Somewhat misleading because it tells where they actually were, Roy. So why is this somewhat misleading? Here's the table of the nations, which is what chapter? Chapter 10. Here's where they actually were. But why is that misleading? In exegesis, what are you trying to do? Exegesis tries to tell what it meant. And the problem is that nobody in the ancient world had seen a map of the world as it actually was, right? In other words, they wouldn't have made a map like this, right? What would their map have been like? If they did have maps. We've got maps from Mesopotamia and so forth. What would it have looked like?
They would have been the center of the world, surely.
Yeah. Well, of course, the covenant land is the center of the world. In Genesis 10, we looked at this. You done with this?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back to, what does El Shaddai do? Anyone?
God of the mountain.
What mountain?
God of the mountain.
What is this?
Cosmos.
What is this? Oh, this isn't the cosmos, but you're on the right track. What is it? It's one part of it. Right? But we don't have the dome and the upper mountain on here. Okay?
Right.
This is the earth, right? With the rivers of Eden. And of course, in Genesis 10, this would have been it, right? The world is round. And where is the covenant land in Genesis 10?
In the
Center. And then you've got the nations, north, south, east, and west. That's how they're described. Okay. So, here's a great map, except that it's misleading because nobody in ancient times would have seen it that way. Let's see. Where were we? We were in Samuel, right? And we were talking about David. Just want you to see some maps. Oh, look, here's the Ephraim and Manasseh, the limits of the tribal control of Ephraim and Manasseh. And what's nice about this is, it gives you the date, 12th century BC, and it puts in darkened spot each place the relevant Old Testament passages. Now they're doing this chronologically from the earliest period on. You see, okay, here's Joshua 15 and 16, the borders of the tribal territories. Okay, and then it gives you what's known, and it refers to the extra biblical text and so forth, what's known about that period. The wars of Gideon. The pursuit after the Midianites. Where exactly did he go? Okay. It's very, 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 very good. All right, so those are some beginning things, basic things. If you read all the way through this book, and all the way through History of Israel, and all the way through the Land of the Bible, you could teach Old Testament in college. That's how far ahead you get. Now, folks who are just coming, we have to apologize to you. You haven't arrived at an auspicious time. Your timing is bad. Why am I saying your timing is bad? Well, you remember that we were in Genesis 19. So let's go back there. Chapter 19. What are you laughing about? This whole passage has been amusing to your husband. Well, the Yahwist does have a great sense of humor, doesn't he? And he believes that Yahweh has a sense of humor and irony. But this isn't, yes. I think we left off just after Lot's offer of his daughters.
It just so happens that my son has this week too in his class, and
Well, I hope that they
They were
didn't,
discussing it.
did they describe in his
They
class
did,
in
yes,
the same
they did.
detail?
They did.
Oh.
We were
They were
surprised.
actually on the same track that we were.
We were
Really?
very surprised.
But it's probably one of your students who's
Well, that's
teaching.
good.
It's not, but I was
It's one
surprised.
Dean Davis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, let's see. Verse 8. I have 2 daughters who don't know man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to the bishop, please only do nothing to these men. Now, Judges 19 was built on this, as I said. For they've taken shelter under my roof. But they said, stand back. They said, this fellow came to sojourn. There's that word for an alien, resident alien. And he would play the judge. Of course, as I said, it was on his watch because he was the elder of the city in charge that night. Now we'll do worse with you than with them, meaning that they decided that he would do nicely as a human sacrifice for the evening. Then they pressed hard against the man Lot and drew near to break the door down. But the men put forth their hands and Lot in the house and shut the door. They struck them with blindness, so the men who were at the door of the house, both small and great, wearied themselves groping for the door, which is a very bad translation. I'm amazed the RSV did so poorly. It's an Akkadian word. This is because this is so much of the Yahweh stories they're old and they have so much ancient wording in them. It's not Hebrew. It's an Akkadian word that means a blinding flash as a theophany, appearance of a god, blinding flash of a thunderbolt. It means that what happened was that the guardian deities of the cities dropped their just human disguise for a moment, and the blinding flash blinded them temporarily. Okay? Doesn't mean that they were blind thereafter, obviously they weren't. And that this then caused them to think that something supernatural had happened, and so what did they do? It literally reads they were blinded temporarily so that they couldn't find the door. And what did they do? They dispersed. Now this gives a lot of time for what happens next. This is the next scene. You know that the Yahwist loves to carry his theology, not by stating it, but what? Where is the theology whenever Jay is writing? It's in the story. How are you going to tell about the characters of the actors? By what they say? No, by what they do.
Bookstore has the Book of J now.
That's a horrendous book. It's nonsense. I'm sorry, I just get shaky. It makes me so angry.
It looked like his thesis in the introduction wasn't fit in, so it's insane.
No, it's an awful book. Then the man said to Lot, have you anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of the place, for we're about to destroy this place. You know that questions are rhetorical in J. They never are eliciting information. Whenever God or one of his actors is present, why are they asking a question? And the questions are always in the judgment scene. What are they for? They're for the person to be forced to speak against himself, to witness against himself. Bring them out of the place, for we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against this people has become great before Yahweh, and Yahweh has sent us to destroy it. By this time, now the two scenes are set against each other. You're not going to be surprised, are you, that we have a chiasm between 18 and 19? No, you shouldn't. Because by now you know that the Yahwist loves chiastic structure. He just absolutely loves to draw mirror images. How does Lot figure out what's going on as opposed to how does Abraham find out what's going on, and what are their reactions? It's not going to be a surprise then that Abraham is being compared to Lot in these two narratives. Right? Now, we want to see some ways that Abraham and Lot are compared. How did Abraham react to the coming of the visitors? Well, he bowed down, it says. But it says that Lot bowed with his face to the ground. Now, would you think such a subtle difference in wording would make a difference? What do we know about the Yahwist? He's extremely careful with his words and his shading, right? Now then, Abraham says, stay here a while I go fetch you a morsel, right? And what does he prepare?
A huge feast.
3 quarts of grain apiece for each man. The new fatted calf just killed on the moment and roasted, yes. Well, he gets a morsel, he makes him a feast that lasts several hours. Lot promises to make a feast. He uses the Persian word mishteh, another old Persian word. Only what does he give them? He gives them unleavened cakes. Abraham promises a little and delivers much. Lot promises much and delivers little. Okay? When it dawns on Abraham what's happening, he pleads. What does he plead for? He pleads for the city and the righteous in it. When Lot finds out what's happening, he pleads. What does he plead? Don't make me go into the wilderness. Can't I go to this little village a little further on? It's just a little way from you. It's just a little village. It's nothing. And he pleads just as often as Abraham does, because, of course, the seeds are in chiasm. And Abraham's pleading does what? Does it make Abraham smaller or bigger? Oh, it makes him bigger. Because of his sense of judgment. Lot pleads and what? It makes him smaller. He looks servile and silly. Okay? With Abraham, Yahweh and the angels are still standing before Abraham. What's the idea? He's on their property, they are his guests, and he's in charge. With Lot, finally, in the end, what do they have to do? Take him by the hand and pull him out so that he gets smaller and smaller until finally what? He's nothing more than a child who has to be pulled out. And wouldn't even be pulled out if it weren't that they had regard not for Lot. That's very clear. Because, of course, he's really talking about the Moabites and Ammonites. You understand that? They wouldn't even be rescuing Lot except for what?
Abraham.
For Abraham. And so there is a deliberate comparison of Abraham to Lot that's clear. That's part of his story. Who is Abraham? Who is Lot? Who's the covenant man and who isn't? Who is Israel as opposed to who is Moab, who is Ammon? Right? And as we've seen before, when he gets to these other nations, how does he feel about them? First of all, we've already said from Genesis 18 and 19, what does the Yahweh say about the Canaanites? What's the appropriate thing for the Canaanites? Total destruction. That's the only attitude that one should take toward the Canaanites and their religion. Total annihilation. And who do you have as the chief actor in that? Who are you following when you totally destroy the Canaanites? You're following Yahweh's action when he destroyed them. Okay? With the Moabites and Ammonites, it's not total destruction, it's some sort of... What do you feel about that? There's some sort of inferior, sad kind of thing that only happened to be there because Abraham was kind enough to intercede to keep him alive. Yeah. All right, so let's go on. Notice the word in it because the Yahwist is busily at work in the way that he is excellent at in characterization and explaining history through characterization. Now it says, so Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law who were to marry his daughters. Oh, now this tells us something important. the two virgin daughters were what? We had gotten this before. They were engaged. Good. They had been paid for. But now, the Yahweh doesn't want you to forget the sons-in-law were where? Because by saying to the very fringes to the last man, what?
They were in the crowd.
They were in the crowd, yes. Yeah. They were part of the Canaanites. So he says to his sons-in-law and a bunch of various daughters, up, get out of this place, for Yahweh is about to destroy the city. But he seemed to his sons-in-law to be jesting. Now picture, if you can you picture Abraham going to any member of his family and telling them something and the family member laughing? No. From Genesis 14, you've already found out that the best thing to do where Abraham is concerned is what? Because though he's gracious and held in high esteem, if you cross him, what?
Sad.
Yeah, you might just good. When morning dawned, now remember, Yahweh tells you that the whole sacrificial system has been functioning since when? Since Eden. And the dawn is the time of what? Morning sacrifice, and what's about to happen? These cities are about to become their own sacrifices, their own sin offerings. When morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, and it's a continued tense, telling you what? The whole night is past, and what? Lot has accomplished how much? The city's about to be destroyed, and what? How much progress has he made? Arise, take your wife and your two daughters, who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city. But he lingered. It says he was still lingering. And of course the use of still lingering, meaning he'd been lingering all night. So that far from the decisive Abraham, who takes in the situation and makes a decision about what he must do immediately, what's the picture you get of Lot? And isn't that the picture you get right from the beginning? Somehow Lot seems to be the original Laodicean. He just doesn't know what to do. Faced with a crisis, what? He's paralyzed. He's absolutely, totally paralyzed with this crisis. As he was when the men came to his door.
That's probably why he didn't get out of the city in the first place, after seeing it.
Oh, I get the picture of somebody who was just carried along by society, and that's what the Yahweh is saying. And he's also saying that if you're weak, what will happen if you leave the Canaanites around? You'll get sucked into it. Yeah, because he never, you understand, he never told the story just to tell you a historical event. This was always contemporary. This is always now. It's not just about what happened in the 18th century BC. It's what effect does that have on us today? Right? Now, so the men seized him and his wife and two daughters by the hand, Yahweh being merciful to him, and they brought him forth and set him outside the city. Alright, so now his whole household is nothing more than his wife and his two daughters. Lot, you see, is not pictured as a very fruitful person. Okay? As opposed to the 318 chieftains that Abraham could call up on a moment's notice. Now they set him outside the city, and when they had brought them forth, they said, flee for your life, don't look back or stop anywhere in the valley, flee to the hills, lest you be consumed. And Lot said to them, oh no, my lords, behold, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life, but I cannot flee to the hills, lest disaster overtake me. Hey! The Yahweh intends this to be a funny line. You're supposed to laugh. Why? Why? You're in Sodom. This last night, disaster has overtaken you. The picture is of a man who just, he's told point blank by God what's going on, and he just doesn't get it. Right?
Behold, the Lord was in this place, and I knew it not.
Yeah. Behold yonder a city. Now, of course, the word Ir in Hebrew just means any collection of buildings. But we better translate a village. It's near enough to flee to, and it's a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? Oh my goodness. That is really, this is sad. And my life will be saved. We get the picture of a man who is so city bred that what? The very thought of the Judean hills is like what? If I go there, how could I live outside a city? Now remember, all the way from chapter 4, what is the Yahweh's attitude towards cities? He despises them.
What's happened to all his wealth? I mean, he was such a big man that he and Abraham couldn't occupy the same space.
Because of all the flocks and herds.
Yeah.
Remember, I was reading one of the commentaries this week that said the Yahweh is great for what he doesn't tell you. He loves to have you fill in the gaps and figure it out. And what's the obvious implication? In fact, there was a commentator in this section who was commenting on the very thing. The obvious implication is what? That Lot has lost everything.
Probably has to drive people to keep himself safe, pay people to be safe.
Yes. He said to him, Behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you spoke, or the village of which you spoke. Make haste, escape there, for I can do nothing till you arrive there. Therefore the name of the city was Zoar, which is little one. The sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to that little place. Then Yahweh rained on Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from Yahweh out of heaven. He overthrew those cities and all the valley. Now, this much can be verified geologically. The southern end of the Dead Sea was once high above the Dead Sea northern part. The northern part is deep, but the southern two-thirds isn't very deep. And the southern two-thirds once was high above the bottom part, northern part. And sometime around the 20th century or 19th century BC, it collapsed. And it dropped about 900 feet. 900 feet. Huh? Yeah, it is. The whole escarpment. I mean, you can even see the sheer places where it happened. It happened as a result of an earthquake. Remember that the Jordan Valley is one of the rift sites between two of the plates of the Earth's surface. And you can see, just by looking at it, that Africa and India were once together. I mean, you can look at North America and Africa and see that they were once together, right? And the Earth is ripping apart there. And this rift goes all the way up to sea level. It just happens that the land rises just slightly above sea level at Aqaba before it meets the sea. Otherwise, the whole Jordan Valley would be underwater. Because it's 1,000 feet below sea level. And the valley rises into just a little hill, and then you come to Aqaba. But then the rift goes right back down and goes all the way down the Gulf of Aqaba and runs into Africa and comes out of Victoria Falls. The rift is about 3,000 miles long. And it was this tearing apart that caused the land to collapse on the southern part of the Dead Sea. Now, it's not very deep now, and the reason is that Jordan and Israel are taking the water out of it because it's so mineral rich. I said it, about 100,000 gallons evaporates off the surface every day, and that's what makes it so slimy. It's not really water in the sense that we know of it. You can sit in it and read the paper, and you don't need an inner tube, you just need a body.
You don't want to drink it.
Oh no, it's ghastly stuff. After it dries on you, it's all powdery. It's utterly powder. Oh, it's an awful thing. You just want to go somewhere and take a shower. The last thing you want And the disaster is that when you get to the showers, it's water taken under this. It's a bad news joke. You see showers and you think, oh good. Until you get there. Yes. Of course, there's some who are hoping to be able to excavate down underneath the bottom, because the bottom part is the shallower part, the southern end, and see if they can find the cities of the plain that was once there. Okay. Now, also, of course, along that rift is the oil and the saltpeter and all the things that made for this eruption. Not only was there an earthquake, but of course there was an eruption. Okay. They still mine saltpeter there, which of course is good for the Israelis because they use it for weapons. And they also mine salt there. One of the things that the Israelis did when they set up the state of Israel in 1948 was they had a commission that read the Old Testament to find out what they could about where the natural resources were fast, so they didn't have to go looking. It's a good idea. Yes. And all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. And it's not by accident that this happens to be the law of Pharaoh in Leviticus. When you go to destroy the cities, you destroy the fields around the cities. Right? Everything that pertains to that city goes. Lot's wife, behind him looked back. They give a double translation for one word here because they couldn't make sense of it. She looked behind him and became a pillar of salt. And of course, when you go down there, you see the salt pillars that are there to this day. It gives you some idea of where it happened when you go to the southern end of the Jordan.
Did she really become a pillar of salt, or just die and
Oh, I think she died and saying she became one with the
with the salt?
with the ground there. Yeah, she became part of the territory. So that when you go and you see these things, you say, well, there's Lot's wife. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before Yahweh. That's the judgment site, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah and all the land of the valley, and behold, and lo, the smoke. It's not the word for smoke, though. It's a word that's sometimes used to describe what rises from incense. The vaporous smell that rises from incense. And he uses this technical religious term intentionally. Why? He wants you to see these cities as what? Sacrifices. Because the cities of Canaan that are going to be destroyed are called sacrifices to Yahweh. They become sin offerings. And in this judgment seat, it's all part of the technical terms of the religion. The cities have no intermediary. They become their own sin offerings. It's like Nadab and Abihu. Right? The first sin offering offered in the sanctuary happened to be Nadab and Abihu through their own misfortune. And behold, the smoke of it could read the vapor of the incense of the land went up like smoke from a furnace. And that's the end of Jay's story. He leaves you there with Abraham looking out over the valley and seeing the dense vapor rising. And he doesn't tell you the obvious. Abraham knows the outcome. And of course, so we always have, the Elohist is always trying to give us a chronological structure so he can relate this to the chronology that they developed for the whole Deuteronomic history. So we have these verses. So it was when Elohim destroyed the cities of the valley that Elohim remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot dwelt. And there's an editorial comment.
Just in case you didn't figure it out.
Yes. The Elohist is certainly a priestly writer. He is probably in the court of David, and he's dressing up the book of Genesis to make it fit, to make it the beginning of the rest of the books, to fit in one unified chronological scheme. And he frequently, in his editing, what he does is inferior to the book as it stood, right? The book that, by now you know that, as far as I'm concerned, Moses is the Yahwist. The book that pre-existed, the Yahwist book, is complete unto itself and is a great literary achievement, and the things that have been put into it to structure it later are almost always inferior.
Didn't you say that some of these chiasms though were part Yahwist and part,
Yeah, but that's probably not like the 10 scenes in the flood that are part Yahwist and part Elohist. That's probably not the work of the Elohist. That was probably there, and he has just changed the wording in places where, you see, all liberal scholars used to say, well, there was an Elohist source from the 9th century and a Yahwist source from the 10th century, and they edited them together. But there was never any evidence that there was an Elohist source that stood independently, because it doesn't make a whole story. It's things like this. The Yahwist book stands as a whole book, complete unto itself. Its theology is very consistent. It's brilliantly written. What happened in those scenes is probably the Elohist came and changed the wording because it wasn't technical phrasing that was in use at that time. It didn't imply to people what he wanted it to imply. Maybe misconceptions had grown up about the story since the time the Yahwist had written. Because the Yahwist uses a lot of this terminology. It was pagan terminology. And what probably happened? Probably a lot of paganism had come in as a result, so he straightens it up. So those 10 scenes were probably all Yahwist scenes originally, but they've been expanded on. And of course, whenever he writes, he never uses the term Yahweh here, because as far as the Elohist is concerned, when does the term Yahweh come? When and only when?
Moses?
With Moses. At the burning bush. Up to that point, the name's never been heard or known as far as the Elohist is concerned. But the Yahwist is anxious to say that even though the patriarchs didn't know him by that name, they call it El, Elyon, El Roi, El Shaddai. Nevertheless, what is he willing to say all the time? That while the patriarchs knew him by these names, who is it that's acting? It's Yahweh. Yes. Okay, now verse 30 and on is another story. It's appended here because it ought to be appended here. Alright? But we have come to the end of the story in verse 28. And when you see this, now Lot went up. It's typical Hebrew narrative. You know you're beginning a story, right? Once upon a time. Once upon a time. Lot went up from Zoar and dwelt in the hills with his 2 daughters, for he was afraid to dwell in Zoar. So he dwelt in a cave with his 2 daughters. Well, this fits perfectly with the preceding story. Why?
But he was afraid to go into the mountains.
Yeah, but then he was...
That, right?
Yes, I know, but now he's afraid to stay there. Why? Because this is only just a little away from Sodom. What's going on? He's in the middle of this Holocaust. Now look, he asked to stay there, right? So now he wanted to stay there. Now he's in the middle of this Holocaust, and very naturally, as anybody would be, what happened? He was afraid. Wouldn't you be afraid?
Terrified.
Yes, so he took provisions. And what did they decide to do? He and the 2 daughters. Mother's already dead. That probably scared him even further.
Go to the mountains.
Yeah, flee to the mountains. Hadn't they told him, flee to the mountains, so you won't be consumed? And they saw this thing coming closer to them, and what did they decide to do? Yes, man, you better stay here, it's no good. So they took some provisions. What?
The boys didn't go.
No, they didn't go. Lot's totally ineffectual. He has no influence over anybody. The only reason that the wife and daughters are there is why? They were dragged out. They didn't go because of him.
So the fiance didn't leave in the first place.
No.
That wouldn't have been appropriate in the story anyway because they were Canaanites.
Yes, that's right.
Right?
That's right.
Just another evidence that Lot was on the wrong track.
Yes. So he dwelt in a cave with his 2 daughters. Now these cliffs facing the Jordan Valley, some of them 1,000 feet high, have caves in them. Other of them have been excavated and have found things right back to the Bronze Age, right back to this time. Whenever Judah was attacked, where did people go?
Into the
It was
cave.
the wilderness of Judea into the caves. So he dwelt in a cave with his 2 daughters. Now, again, we're going to have an exegetical problem where we read this story differently than the author intended it. We're going to curse the daughters for this whole thing, but this isn't how it's going to be presented. What do these 3 think from what you read in the story? What do they think?
And no one else is alive.
That's right. They think. That's right. You got it. They think they're the last people on earth. They think. Well, of course, everybody they knew was what?
Yeah.
Dead. Yes.
And they were.
And so they naturally assume that God has done what? Destroyed the world. And they think, who knows why, that God has somehow decided to spare the 3 of them. They think they're the only people alive on earth. They came out of this conflagration. Remember the man who was out by the mountain when it exploded?
St. Helens?
Yes, Mount St. Helens, and he had his tape recorder on, and he didn't know if he was in hell or not. Everything was burning around him. It was very dramatic. You listen to that tape? Oh, it's amazing. The trees are on fire, his shoes are burning. Doesn't know if he's alive or dead, if he's arrived in hell or what's going on. He asks in the middle of his tape, he's barely able to breathe, if this is the end of the world, if God's destroyed the world. And you think of Lot and his daughters, they think that the world has been destroyed.
Can I ask a question? They refer to heathen in here that dragged them out of the city. What did they think that was? Did they know they were angels?
Well, now see, we can catch you easily.
But you have been.
Well, excuse me.
But since you've been brave, what do you think an angel is?
Well, I mean, they're referred to in a human sense in this passage.
Well,
But
for
then-
a while, and then they become.
And then for them to think they're the only ones up means that they must not have perceived them as physical beings.
No, they think that they're God.
But yet they
An
still
angel is a
really
messenger
not.
of God who has the authority of God and the quality of God. In fact, we already know who they are because we've been looking at Old Testament cosmology. If you want to be very specific, who were the 2? They were members of the heavenly court. Precisely who were they?
Sons of God, they were the appointed governors of the city.
They were the cosmic deities of the city whose business it was to run the city. And they had come to Yahweh with what complaint? That's why there were 2 of them. They were the guardian. We call them guardian angels, but it doesn't apply to us what it means in the Bible. The guardians were there to guard order for the high God. And they had obviously gone to the heavenly court and entered a complaint. And what was that?
Couldn't control it.
Yes, that's right. Because if they hadn't done that, who would have been held responsible? They would have. Let's read Psalm 81. That's exactly when society gets out of control, God holds the intermediate deities that He's placed in charge responsible if they don't run things right. They should be telling Him if there's trouble. We have this all the way down to the angels holding the 4 winds. Same thing. Yeah. So it was these 2, and Abraham understood that it was Yahweh and the 2 divine governors of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. He knew.
But did Lot hear them as gods with a small g?
Sure. Because that's exactly how the pagan world did it. The Old Testament doesn't say that there aren't intermediate deities between Yahweh and the world. It just says don't what? Don't worship them because they're not self-created. But they are divine beings. Yeah. And the firstborn said to the younger, Our father is old, and there's not a man on earth to come in to us after the manner of all the earth. Now, you've got to read this and understand what she means. She says what? This is the last man on earth. Therefore what? We have to make what choice? Now, of course, you're supposed to think of home. As these girls busily go about to get their father so drunk that they can rape him, who are we supposed to think of? Ham, and the curse on? Cain, the Canaan, yes. Yes. Come, let us make our father drink wine, we'll lie with him, that we may preserve seed through our father, meaning we'll preserve human life. So when they made their father drink wine that night, the firstborn went in and lay with the father. He did not know when she lay down or when she rose, so he's absolved of the guilt here. What was Noah's condition at the time that Ham raped him?
Drunk.
The next day the firstborn said to the younger, I lay with my father, let's make him drunk tonight also, then you go and lie with him. We preserve offspring through our father. Now, of course, the Yahweh wants us to remember, these girls are what? Virgins. After the manner of the Canaanites. After all, what had Lot only recently done? Yes, when he was afraid that men were going to be raped, he offered the daughters, and so now we have them
Offering themselves.
busily raping their father here. Now, is this a positive or a negative view? Well, it has some positive aspects. The Yahweh says they had a good motive, but what? His problem is that they have been influenced by what? The Canaanites, and how do they act?
Just like that.
They act like Canaanites. And so now he's telling you about Moab and Ammon. The problem with them is they were part of the covenant family. They had the blessings of the covenant because they were part of the covenant family, but what?
Acted like Canaan.
They got influenced by the Canaanites and they act like Canaanites. And that's how you should think about Moab and Ammon. He's making political statements. And all political statements are theological statements in the ancient world, right? Thus both the daughters of Lot were with child by their father. The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He's the father of the Moabites to this day. The younger also bore a son called his name Ben-Ami. Well, Ben-Ami means the children of Ammon, so it's a patronymic. It's a name for a people, not a person. It's the name of a people, not a person. He's the father of the Ammonites to this day. Okay. So, does Jay tell you that I'm talking about the Moabites and the Ammonites? Now let's say again, is he writing about a personal historical event? Or is he writing about politics? Or is he writing about theology?
Well, not all of them.
Yeah. You have to remember that he operates always on multiple levels. That's the way he writes. He expects you to be smart enough to understand what he's talking about. Now that we have a chapter next that is a very... chapter 20, I don't know what to do with. I think... I'll just say it's unfortunate. Let's put it that way. From there, Abraham journeyed toward the territory of the Negev and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur, and he sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said to Sarah his wife, she is my sister. And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But Elohim said to Abimelech in a dream by night, Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you've taken, for she is a man's wife. What does this make us think of right away? This is what's called a doublet. What is this?
It's bad.
What is this a doublet of?
Pharaoh experienced Egypt.
Yeah. And so the question comes, did it happen twice? Or did it happen once and they're telling two different versions of the same story? The J story is a lot better told. Besides which, this is in the wrong place anyway. How old is Sarah now?
90 something.
Well, yeah.
She's almost 100 years old.
She's almost 100 years old. What do we know about her?
She's barren.
She's
But beautiful.
She described herself as a withered old hag earlier, right? And here...
But women always act like that.
No.
best be read with the same story back, where is it? How far back is it?
And
12. Yes. Yes. And that would have been a nice place to put it. Doesn't make any sense here. Neither chronologically nor thematically. Who's writing here, by the way?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he likes to explain things, doesn't he? Verse 4. Now Abimelech had not approached her, so he said, Sir, and my Lord, wilt thou slay an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, she's my sister, and she herself said he was my brother? In the integrity of my heart and in the innocence of my hands I've done this. Doesn't sound like a Canaanite king, does it? The Yahwist would never let you get off with a Canaanite who sounded like he was a good or innocent person, right? He has nothing good to say about them. Then God said to him in a dream, Yes, I know that you've done this in the integrity of your heart, and it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore I did not let you touch her. Now restore the man's wife, for he is a prophet. And there's the technical term again. You see, prophet. You would never have a word like Navi used at this time. Why? When did prophets come into existence? At what time? Who was the first prophet, technically? Navi. Changed from seer to Navi. When did prophecy come into existence? For Samuel. Modern. Gives you an idea of when we are, where we are when we're reading E. Does this, he is a prophet, fit with the theology of the hours? Not at all. Not even remotely. And he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not restore her, know that you shall surely die, you and all that are yours. So Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants and told them all these things. The men were very much afraid. Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, What have you done to us? How have I sinned against you, and you've brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? You've done to me things that ought not to be done. And Abimelech said to Abraham, What were you thinking of that you did this thing? It's kind of repetitious, isn't it? Abraham said, I did it because I thought there was no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. Now that, technically that isn't even correct, is it? How is she his sister? What?
Adopted.
She is the sister wife of Amalekite law. When God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, This is the kindness you must do to me at every place to which we come. Say of me, he is my brother. Then Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male and female slaves and gave them to Abraham and restored Sarah his wife to him. And Abimelech said, Behold, my land is before you, dwell where it pleases you. To Sarah he said, Behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It's your vindication in the eyes of all who are with you, and before everyone you are righted. Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech. He hadn't heard about any disease yet, and healed his wife and female slaves so that they bore children. For Yahweh had closed all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Isn't that interesting? Now, don't get the idea that the Elohist never uses the name Yahweh, because he does, frequently. And the older liberal scholars would have said what? Every time you see the word Yahweh, what does that mean? That's the Yahwist writing. And so they made a patchwork of them. I mean, you could be halfway through a verse and they'd cut it and say, this is E, this is J. It's nonsense, absolute nonsense. Anyway, that's a doublet to the experience of Abraham with Sarah in Egypt. No necessity that it's not necessarily historical, could be. What's the usual arguments against it being historical? What are the usual arguments? What do you think they would be? First of all, it is clearly a doublet. Right? It's the same story told not as well. What else? That it's in the wrong place.
Things like the prophet and stuff like that that doesn't belong with the rest of it.
And the Canaanite king talking about it being a prophet.
Right.
What else?
Is he trying to make a point about God's justice, and at least when, Abimelech was talking to God in a dream and earlier where Abraham was arguing that, God was, the just judge of the world, that he wouldn't destroy the righteous. Do you think there's a connection between this?
Well, maybe you're right. Maybe that's the thematic. I mean, it must be here for some reason. The Elohist editor thought this was the right place to put it, and obviously not for chronology because they weren't very concerned with that when they were telling the story. Maybe that's the thematic connection. That could be. The other question that's often asked is, how could Abraham have done the same thing twice? Well, I don't think that's a very strong argument. Why? It's not possible for a person to make the same mistake twice. Is it possible that he did make the same mistake twice? Once in Palestine, the other in Egypt? Oh yes, sure.
Well, it sounds like it was habitual, at least if he said that was what she was supposed to say every
Yeah,
place where they went.
That's right. The story itself, that's one of the things I wanted to say is, one reason that you wouldn't buy that argument, the story itself says that he told her to say that wherever they went. Which would mean it would be possible for this same disaster to occur twice. Not here chronologically, but earlier in her life.
Part it seems like the heroic soldier, though.
Oh, it's a very different picture of Abraham than the one the Yahwist draws.
Well, doesn't that suggest that the timing is wrong too? Because by this time in the main story, Abraham is probably not afraid of anything that strikes the earth.
No, he's in control because after chapter 17, he's already told. Remember when I said he was told to walk around the land and view it? And that means to make a tour of inspection. And it's usually the word that's used for a king inspecting his defenses. So that from that point on in the Yahweh story, Abraham is pictured as the king in Palestine.
He's immensely rich.
Where all the other
huge household.
Yeah, where all the others pay deference to him, he doesn't live in the city because he doesn't want to. Okay? Because he's looking for something that God hasn't shown him yet. But everybody knows it. But if he wanted to be the king in a city-state and take them over, you get the sense that they understand that he could. And he's a Hebrew. Chapter 14, he's Abraham the Hebrew. Right? In that Akkadian story that's brought in. And what does that mean? He's not just a chieftain, but a warrior. Which means that he's a little bit, as far as the settled people, he's a little bit dangerous. He's somebody that you want to keep on your side. Why? What were the Hebrews, the Hebrew, habitually doing? They were habitually, slaughtering cities.
But I think that would be a very young too, because it sounds, if he and Sarah were doing this thing, they would sound like wandering gypsies or something who were really duping the people as they went and getting all this wealth.
Yes. Yeah. Now, yeah.
What is the connection between Sarah's rebuke or reproach and her brother getting rich at somebody else's expense?
Well, he gave money
Yeah,
to
he gave
her
that to Abraham.
because
Thus, she was reproved. Right?
she was straightened out.
My brother 1,000 or my wife 1,000, that doesn't hurt me a bit.
No, it helps you.
Precisely.
And the argument being that they were doing this in some sort of a way of fleecing people of their money.
Scam.
That's what I wondered. How was she reproved? Man?
She's not reproved. She's righted. Why? What do you have?
Thus she was reproved.
That,
What verse are you reading?
Well, that's in the translation.
16.
Yeah.
It says justified.
Yeah.
Oh, that's lost in the translation.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
It's the opposite. It's
She was reproved.
She's put back, right, she's put back to her rightful state.
Okay.
Okay. So yes, I see nothing against the idea that this actually happened, even though I don't think the Elohim tell stories very well. But this isn't the place to put it. You have to put it back there when they first entered Canaan, early on. That's the picture. Now let's go back to the main story, as he put it. Yahweh visited Sarah as he had said. Oh yes, this is the natural follow-up, because what were we following in 18 to 19? What was the whole thing? Right? The three came, and they began talking about the wife as if they wanted to have sexual relations with her. Right? That's the interplay between that story and Lot, where he gave the daughters. And he had said that about this time in the spring, Sarah will have a son. Right? So now we're picking that story up. Yahweh visited Sarah as he had said, and Yahweh did to Sarah as he had promised. Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which Elohim had spoken to him. Notice the Yahweh isn't above. Is it Elohim or El? Well, you got it right in front of you?
It's what Yahweh said to Sarah.
It's verse 2.
Verse 2. It's Elohim at the end.
Is it?
At the end of verse 2. The time had spoken with him, Elohim.
The Yahweh doesn't like Elohim so much as he likes El and combinations of El with other epithets, divine epithets, Canaanite names for God. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him Isaac, which means what? Everything from smiling to laughter to derision. It's the whole range of meanings from about. Now, the name Isaac is explained in 3 ways. What are the 3 ways?
You mean how he got the name?
Yeah.
Abraham laughed. Sarah laughed.
And then after the child is born, she's playing with him and she's what? She's laughing at the baby after he's born. So there are 3 different explanations of how the name came to be. All right. Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God commanded. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Remember, this was the year after Ishmael became a man and was circumcised. Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears me will laugh over me. See? Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would suckle children? Yet had born a son in his old age. So that's the 3rd explanation. Child grew weaned. How long does that take? Well, anywhere from 3 months to 3 years in ancient times. Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she bore to Abraham, playing with his son Isaac. Well, this is 3 months later. The boy's 13. And what's he doing? He's 13. He's still a kid himself. And what's he doing? He's playing with the baby. There's no hint here of him abusing the child. So said to Abraham, cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of the slave woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac. The thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. God said to Abraham, be not displeased because of the lad and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for through Isaac shall your descendants be named. Now make a nation of the sons of the slave woman also, because he is your offspring. So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, put it on her shoulder along with the child, and sent her away, and she departed and wandered in the wilderness, the southern Judean wilderness near Beersheba. Alright? We've already been through this before, how this came to be. Just about the time it looked like it was settled, it becomes a curse all over again. When the water in the skin was gone, she cast the child under one of the bushes. She went, sat down over against him a good way off, about the distance of 2 bow shots, it says, not 1. She said, let me not look on the death of the child. She sat over against him. The child lifted up his voice. Is that what it says? No, it says she lifted up her voice in Hebrew and wept. God heard from the voice of the lad, the angel, yes, because what does the name mean?
God will hear.
El hears. Yes. And before, it was El heard by the well, before he was born, and now it was two explanations for the name. And now it's what? Here's the other one. Now the child is 13 years old and God hears his voice. God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar?" Remember, it was the angel of the Lord last time. It was the angel of the hour. "Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad. Hold him fast with your hand, I'll make him a great nation." God opened her eyes, she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the skin with water and gave the lad a drink. And God was with the lad, he grew up and lived in the wilderness and became expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, in other words, the northern Sinai Peninsula. His mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. Who has to pay for the wife normally? Who pays for the wife normally? The father. This time, the mother has to pay for the wife. Yes. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, "God is with you in all that you do. Now therefore swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me or my offspring or with my posterity. But as I deal loyally with you, you deal with me, with the land where you sojourn." Abraham said, "I will swear." Now we're going to get a story about the well. And what is this doing here? What is this? How did this get here? This is dislocated too. This is another Elohim story that's totally dislocated. Well, the thing that brought it here was the mention of Beersheba in verse 14 and the well in the following paragraph. Okay? Now he's going to tell you about the origins of the well. Now here I can see why it's here. It's dislocated chronologically, but I know why it's here. It's here thematically because the thing that's tying it together is the well at Beersheba. You follow? Okay. So at that time, it's not a good translation, is it? Because what we're talking about is not at the time that Hagar wandered there. That was long after Beersheba was an oasis. What was at that time? At the time the well was dug, which was when Abraham first came into Canaan. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all these Elohim stories and shift them back to about chapter 12 or so. Okay. When Abraham complained to Abimelech about a well of water which Abimelech's servants had seized, Abimelech said, "I don't know who has done this thing. You didn't tell me, and I've not heard of it until today." So Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech. The two men made a covenant. That's the way you do it. Abraham set 7 ewe lambs and flock apart. Abimelech said to Abraham, "What's the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs that you've set apart?" He said, "The 7 ewe lambs you will take from my hand. You may be a witness for me that I dug this well." Okay? So Beersheba means 7 wells. So the 7 initially means 7 lambs, right? We're going to get another double explanation. Therefore, that place was called Beersheba because there both of them swore an oath. Oh, I see, because Shevat also means, besides 7, it also means oath. So now we've got another explanation for the name. The well of the oath, or the well of the 7. The 7 referring to the lambs, the oath referring to the oath they took. So they made a covenant with the 7 wells. Then Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, rose up, returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a sacred tree in Beersheba. It's the first time we've seen this. And called there on the name of Yahweh, the everlasting God. Here, Yahweh is El Olam, the God of eternity, from the Canaanite pantheon. And Abraham sojourned many days in the land of the Philistines. And again, that tells us when this story was written. It wasn't written by the Yahwists before they entered Canaan in the 15th century. Why? Moses wouldn't have told you that anybody lived in the land of the Philistines. Why? Because when Moses lived, there weren't any Philistines. Right? And they only came near the end of the period of the Judges, concrete, and that's how they started fighting for possession of the land with the Hebrews. Right? Little indications of the text. Now, after these things, right, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son Isaac. Now how old is the child? There's a direct link here between here and the making of the covenant when Isaac was 13. Right? And that's chapter 17.
Do you mean when Ishmael was?
When Ishmael, am I saying Isaac meaning Ishmael?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. When Ishmael, remember how old was Abraham when he was promised Ishmael, when Ishmael was born?
When he was promised.
When Ishmael was born, how old was Abraham?
86.
86. How old was he when he circumcised Ishmael? 99. That was the promise of Isaac. So Ishmael was 13. Yes. Now then, how old is Isaac? Well, he's 13.
He has to be 13.
Yes, that's the point. God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son, Isaac. Now, what's the point here?
Not to have a mistake. Who he's talking about.
Yeah, but,
Ishmael was not your son.
Isaac is the son promised.
yeah. As far as this is concerned, that sets the tone for the meaning of the chapter. With Abraham, we stop the primeval history. With Abraham, we begin the plan. Abraham understands that the plan is going to take a long period of time, right? The plan is that God is going to shape human history by Abraham and his seed. It says so. This is the means by which God is going to shape human history. All the other nations will be blessed or cursed by reference to this nation. This is, all right. Abraham isn't living in the city. He hasn't settled down like an ordinary man, even though he's old, because he's part of a plan. He's devoted his entire life to that plan. The plan rests on what? One of the great concerns of his life when he was old was that he didn't have a child. How could the plan be carried out if he didn't have a child? That's what caused Sarah legally to feel her legal duty under Amorite law to provide a wife. Now then, the whole thing is in reference to the plan. Under the plan, there's only one son. Do you follow?
Yeah. That's the covenant one.
Yep. So it tells you right now that it's about the plan. The promise to bless all the nations through the seed that is the issue here. Whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will tell you. Now again, a whole burnt offering, what happens with a whole burnt offering? What do you do with a whole burnt offering? You kill it, you cut it up, you clean it, and then you put all the pieces back together, and then what do you do? You burn it to ash. Alright. Again, he's using the technical terms here. What question comes to mind immediately? There.
How is he going to have descendants?
Yes. Do you mean now that he's very old, he has to start over with another son? That this isn't the promised child either? Now look, when Ishmael got to be 13, another son was coming to take his place. Now what? Maybe it's going to happen again. Wouldn't this just cause your heart to sink?
And whenever am I going to see the promise?
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's something here that wasn't there before. This time, Abraham trusts God to do exactly what he says. The other two times he wasn't sure, but this time he just goes right ahead because no matter what happens, he knows God's as good as His word.
Look, what does it tell you in the first verse?
God tempted Abraham.
Yes,
Test.
well, yes, the word means to tempt and to test. Okay? It tells you that's the purpose. But you've got to understand that you're viewing it. The Yahweh does this to you. Point of view is important in telling a story.
And this tends to use Elohim more than in this chapter.
Yeah, it is. Verse 15, the angel of Yahweh called Abraham a second time. Yeah, you remember that he likes to have you know that Abraham worshipped Yahweh under the names of various Canaanite deities, but it's really Yahweh. Oh, I should say something else. Again, the old scholarly distinction that if it's always Elohim, it's got to be the Elohim, if it's always Yahweh, it's got to be the Yahweh, and they never cross over, simply isn't true. But there's another thing that there's a whole thematic thing, and there's a whole style that's totally different between these two authors. And all you have to do is read the style here, how he treats characterization and how he treats theology, and what can you tell?
Yeah, it seems like it.
This is the author of Genesis. Yeah.
Well, this is one of the greatest stories.
Yeah, that's right. He doesn't tell you, he doesn't do a lot of explaining. He's not going to tell you how Abraham felt. That's not his narrative style. He expects you to do what? To think about how Abraham must have felt. So Abraham rose early.
And Isaac.
Yes, and Isaac. Well,
Isaac,
he
he
lets
would know at
Isaac
this
in on
point.
no, he doesn't, but he lets Isaac in on it gradually. Settled his ass, took two of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place far off. So what do you picture now? Was this a simple matter?
Mm-hmm. It's a long trip.
It's a long trip for an old man. They've been traveling for 3 days. They've left their home. And what does Abraham do? You're supposed to fill in the gaps. You're taking the son, and you know what?
A long time to think about it.
Yeah, and he's not coming back. Abraham said to the young man, "Stay here with the ass. I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again to you." And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. Great image, right? That's the picture.
The cross.
It's an
the little child, the man's old, and the little child, 13 years old, is carrying his own funeral pyre to his death.
It's so interesting that this seems parallel to like Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane and all that. And yet they rejected, all this was here, and yet they did not accept it.
That's right. The same imagery is followed through, of course. And he took in his hand the fire. What is that? That's the coals in the brazier, because this is an offering. Remember, it's the ceremonial system, and he's got the whole thing.
So he brought that all the way from home?
Yes. And the knife. So they went, both of them together. The Yahweh knows how to draw a poignant scene. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, "My father?" He said, "Here I am, my son." Why are they so silent? Why is there so little talking? First of all, because the Yahweh has an economy of talking.
But they're hiking up a mountain.
Yes. And why is Abraham quiet?
Oh man.
Go.
Well, just think he's going to kill his own son. Must
What
be
do you-
very sad.
Yes, it's very sad. And what's happening with the boy?
He's
Well, he
lying.
finally says, the
What's happening?
fire and the wood, where's the lamb for the burnt offering? What is the Yahweh telling him?
He's starting to figure it out.
It has dawned on Isaac what?
Something different, right?
Yeah, something isn't right. And I wonder.
But what do you think he sees? The Yahweh wants you to see it with him.
Inside.
Yes. He's caught it, finally. Abraham said, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering, my son.
So they must, even with Isaac, they must still be carrying out human sacrifice because he finally knows what's happening.
Oh, remember, the Yahwist is always writing on multiple levels. He's always, just about the time you're settled on one thing, he's tricking you. He's also talking about what? What's he talking about? That in Israel we don't practice human sacrifice. Yeah. Again, and he's making by implication, without ever saying it, who's he making a comparison to? The Canaanites who what? Practice human sacrifice. So they went, both of them together. I looked in the text to see if there was dislocation, and there isn't. The Yahwist rarely repeats himself, but here he says, so they went both of them together, and Isaac asked the question, Abraham answers. And then he says, so they went both of them together. It's an inclusio. It's a little scene. And what's the little scene? It's the heart of the whole thing.
That Isaac is in agreement with what's happening.
Yes. And the question is, and this is why in Israel you don't practice human sacrifice. Why? Because God ordered it, and what? And Abraham said, God will provide the sacrifice. And the sacrifice, God provided. So there's no need for human sacrifice. It becomes a theological argument.
Couldn't Isaac have thought that he must have known the story how he was a miracle baby?
Oh, yes.
And that God was sort of told that he was provided to Abraham.
Yeah, but you know what I would think of if I was him? I'd think of how Cain murdered Abel and God provided Seth in Abel's place. That's what I would think of. Maybe I'm done for, he's got another son for father.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see. Maybe.
But they went both of them together. They were going together before it dawns on Isaac, and now Isaac is 13. He's a man. He's responsible for his own decisions.
He
He's
said
old,
something about his
he's
training.
old enough so that what?
You can decide not to
He
go.
could say no. And then the Yahweh says, so they went both of them together. Meaning what? First, it was Abraham's decision. And then what?
It's both of
It
them.
was Isaac's decision. This is great stuff here.
It sounds like what the Middle Easterners still do. They go willingly to sacrifice.
That's true. That is true.
But Abraham was evidently quite a father. I mean, he had 13 years, and look what the kind of man he had
Yes.
produced in 13 years. Isaac already had the faith at 13 that his father took 100 years to acquire.
Yes. Did a lot better with him than he did with Lot. Maybe Lot was too spoiled already. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar, on the wood. Then Abraham put forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of Yahweh, it's always the Yahweh's term, called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And of course the repetition is always significant because what? It expresses what? Urgency. He said, here I am, or here am I, which is what Abraham's saying all along. He said, do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God. For you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. So we see that if Abraham was now in danger of worshiping anything, or holding anything back from God, what would it be? His son.
Did Sarah know what was going on?
Probably.
I would say that she probably did. And the reason I say that is because in the Yahweh stories, what is Sarah's legal relationship to Abraham? She's not his wife. She's his sister, which means what? His equal. That's the thing that the Yahweh keeps stressing. Sarah was his equal and therefore had what? As far as legal rights to Isaac, what? unlike, this is Amorite law, unlike a wife who wouldn't have had anything to say about it, she had what?
Equal rights.
She had equal rights to say yes or no about this. And
But
the Yahweh never goes into those
She
details about
wasn't
it.
consulted.
Huh?
She wasn't consulted.
Well, it's not in the story. but
Yeah,
we
but
don't
the
know
Yahweh
that.
doesn't tell you those things.
But you know, he didn't tell her before when the
That's
angel
by
had told
night.
her that she was going to have a baby. He hadn't told her.
That's true. I do remember that he had
And-
forgotten to mention that relative.
And he just might not have told her about this. He seems to keep secrets from Sarah.
Well, maybe he's gotten beyond that. She's referring to a chapter where the first time the annunciation of Isaac's birth, a year passed and Abraham never mentioned Isaac
To Sarah.
to Sarah, the event.
Of course, you hear that he got up early in the morning to avoid Sarah. That sounds
Yeah.
But
I know-
if you were traveling for 3 days, I mean, usually you get up early to travel. It was that long a trip, so.
She was in on it when the men came to announce his birth.
Yeah, afterwards.
Oh, she was behind the tent flap and she was listening. Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, Yahweh will provide. As it is said to this day, on the mount of Yahweh it shall be provided. Okay. Now, of course, that mount of Yahweh had changed its meanings. To the Exodus, the mount of Yahweh was what? So,
Yeah,
well, where was the mountain in the Exodus?
in the Sinai.
In the Sinai. Until, of course, the sanctuary came, and then the altar with its 7 levels was the covenant mountain. And then the mountain went with them. When they left, they took it with them. Yes, and then, of course, it became the temple mountain. And the angel of Yahweh called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, By myself I have sworn, says Yahweh. Because the angel of Yahweh, of course, is Yahweh himself in finite form. Because you've done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will indeed bless you and multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven and the sand on the sea. Here's where the sand came from. We went to look for it last time and couldn't find it because it wasn't there. And your descendants shall possess the gate of their enemies, and by your descendants shall all the nations of the earth bless themselves because you have obeyed my voice. Again, the theology of the covenant in the Yahweh is not what we hear today. It is not true that the covenant with Abraham rested on faith and the covenant at Sinai rested on works. There is no such distinction in the Old Testament. And yet I hear that consistently. I've heard that in Adventist churches on Saturday morning during sermons. I've had lots of occasions to develop patience listening to sermons. Let's go back. Remember, the Yahweh doesn't like to make a big deal about theology. But let's go back to what God said about Abraham as he was talking about the decision to destroy Sodom. And that is in chapter 18. Verse 17. Yahweh said, Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do, seeing that Abraham shall become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by him? No, for I have chosen him in order that he may charge his children and his household after him to keep the way of Yahweh by doing righteousness and justice, so that Yahweh may bring to Abraham what he has promised him. It is not true that the covenant was unconditional to Abraham, but conditional to Moses. The Abrahamic covenant is conditioned on what?
Abraham's
Obedience.
doing something.
Obedience.
Yeah. Now the Yahweh doesn't make a big deal about it, but he says it very clearly. And this is in the mouth of God here. Right? Now, okay, in this passage, what does it say here? Verse 18, by your descendants shall all the nations of the earth bless themselves, because you have obeyed my voice. Now, of course, the quality that he's describing, and he says in one of the first stories we read, that Abraham believed God and was reckoned to him as righteousness. Of course, he's describing the quality of faith. Yes, we know that. He's describing the quality of faith. But how is faith shown if you're the writing and reading the hours? How is faith shown?
By doing something.
First of all, faith in the Western sense is an idea. It's an abstraction. It's a Greek concept. Right? Do you have faith, brother?
You keep the faith.
Yeah, that's a Western abstraction. The Greek concept of faith as some sort of abstract belief system, it couldn't be known in the ancient world. Why? Because in the ancient world they didn't have abstractions. How would you know that somebody had faith?
Like what they do.
Yeah, what they do.
Is this the root of the show me your faith by, and I'll show you my faith later on? Is this the traditional Hebrew argument against the Greek argument of the day?
Yes, that's right. We have to say that Lot didn't have any faith. It doesn't say that anywhere, but it does say it. Why? Look at how he acted. He didn't have any faith. Because that's how you find out. You couldn't separate out in their minds your actions and what you believe. Is it psychologically true that you act out what you believe? Of course. I think people act out what they really believe. There couldn't be any judgment by your works if there wasn't.
But I God was not rejected for emotions. God here for me.
But you act on your motive.
Why?
Okay, we do that. Let's take this story right here. His motive wasn't to murder his son, it was to what?
Offerings. Make an offering.
Motivation is probably
But it's more of to do with
to obey. Yes.
Offer our best son.
Yes. Because you've obeyed my voice, it says, okay, your descendants will possess. Notice now that the offering of Isaac, or the willing offering of Isaac, becomes the occasion of another covenant. Okay? We're going to get this now.
Different than the previous?
Yep, because this possessing the gates of your enemies is a new phrase. Political conquest. Remember when the Yahwist is writing. When is he writing? Just before what?
Before the Exodus?
Before the entry into Canaan. Yeah. Alright. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they arose and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham dwelt in Beersheba. Now after these things it was told Abraham, behold, Milcah also has borne children to your brother Nahor. And not, how many do you think there are? Let's take a guess.
3.
Huh?
7.
1, 2, 3,
8.
7.
Plus 8.
Plus what? Plus 4 more. Meaning there are how many? There are 12 tribes. And how many does Ishmael become?
It was 12 princes.
Yeah, chapter 25. Verse 12. How many does Ishmael become? he becomes 12 tribes. This is the same thing we had in the genealogies in chapters 5 and 10, right? Alright? So 12 tribes, and 12 tribes. 12 being the 12 new moves, the 12 months of the year, a full span, the complete cycle, 12 stories. Okay. Now then, the next chapter is also important. Sarah lived 127 years, the span of her life. Sarah died at Kiryat Arba, that is Hebrew, using the old names. So this is before it's changed. The name was changed in Joshua's time. So again, this gives us an indication of date, an indication that liberal scholars miss. If he unconsciously uses the name Kiryat Arba, then it hasn't been changed to Hebrew and it's prior to the time of Joshua. In the land of Canaan. Notice how he frequently does that. The author unconsciously refers to Canaan as if it's what? As if it's somewhere else from where he is. Have you noticed that? Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and weep for her, and Abraham rose up from before the dead. Mourning and weeping, it's two technical phrases from Akkadian. It's the official mourning and weeping. It's not contemporary. Abraham rose up from before his dead, said to the Hittites, I am a stranger and a sojourner among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. The Hittites answered Abraham, Hear us, my lord, you are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our sepulchres. None of us will withhold from you his sepulchre, or hinder you from burying your dead. And Abraham rose and bowed to the Hittites, the people of the land, and he said to them, If you are willing that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me Ephron the son of Zohar. Now the people of the land is a technical phrase, you need to know that. When David consulted with the people of the land, he was talking about the landed gentry. It was the council that ran the country. The people of the land are the great landowners. And Sarah has died, so he comes to the Hittite council, to the great landowners, and he asks to buy a sepulchre, and they say, oh no, you're a mighty revered person, any one of us will give you a sepulchre, but that isn't what he wanted. That wouldn't suffice at all. What was he after? And what makes this chapter significant? Why is the story told at such great length? It's obviously something rather important.
He didn't want them to give him anything, so he wouldn't be
Indebted to them?
indebted to them.
No.
Right, to possess the land.
And this is the first what?
Fruits of the possession.
First fruits of the possession. That's exactly right. This is the first possession of the land. And he doesn't want a gift. And he doesn't want something that's borrowed. He wants what? Something he owns. And he's an old man and a wealthy man, and he's very deliberately avoided what? Ever owning anything before. Sarah has died, and she is the mother of the covenant people, and she's regarded theologically, and she must be buried where? On her own land, in her own burial place. This is the beginning of the setting up of the nation. All right?
But I thought he was a very rich man. You say now that he didn't own anything?
But he was a
Didn't
wanderer.
own land.
Oh, didn't own land.
Okay, now he asks them.
He was
as
Hebrew.
Yes, he was a Hebrew.
Nomadic.
That's right. That's right. Entreat for me Ephron the son of Zohar. That's the man's full name. It's treated very formally here. Probably Ephron was right there. He was probably one of the landed gentry. And this is typical Oriental interaction where you talk past each other. You know, there is something to say that we should take Saddam Hussein's offer seriously, because it's true that in the Middle East to this day, You don't say exactly what you mean. Nobody's that uncouth. You hint at what you mean, and you talk past what you mean, and the person who's listening and who's listening carefully, what?
That's what you said.
Should be able to understand. And this is a good example of it here. Does Abraham say, no, I'm going to possess the land, and this is the first piece of it, and I want to buy it? That's what he means, but that's not what he's saying. Entreat for me Ephron the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah which he owns. It's at the end of his field. For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence as a possession. Now it says for the full price in silver, meaning the exchange rate in silver. This is a technical term. Again, an Amorite term for, okay, Abraham doesn't have silver. What does he have? He has goods, and there is an exchange rate set up. So many of such and such is worth so many shekels of silver, and so you exchange it, get the silver, that's how much I'm going to pay for it. Now Ephron was sitting among the Hittites, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the Hittites of all who went in at the gate of the city, because of course we're talking about the landed gentry. No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that's in it. Abraham knew exactly where it was. He knew exactly what he wanted. He started out talking as if he had something general in mind, and then you find out that he had something very specific in mind. And this man says, I'll give you the whole field and the cave that's in it. And did he mean it?
Sure.
Did he mean? Oh no, you're misreading. This is the Orient. So I'm going to give you the whole thing. Did he mean it as a gift?
No.
No, you're not saying. I give you the field, I give you the cave that is in it, the presence of the sons of my people, I give it to you, bury your dead. And Abraham bowed down before the people of the land, and he said to Ephron in the hearing of the people, but if you will, hear me. I will give the price of the field, accept it from me, that I may bury my dead there. Ephron answered Abraham, my lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver, what's that between you and me? Bury your dead. And now you find out.
We're rich for you.
Well,
Rich.
there's records among the Amorites of entire cities being bought for 20 shekels of silver at this time in the 19th and 18th century BC. So that what do you know?
He was overcharging it.
The 400 shekels of silver is enough to buy the covenant land, and he has to pay that for what? And did you notice how he slipped it in there? Yeah, what is this? A little piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What's that between you and me? Abraham agreed with Ephron, and Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver which he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weights carried among the merchants. So the field of Ephron and Machpelah, which is to the east of Mamre, the field with the cave which was in it, and all the trees that were in the field throughout that whole area, was made over to Abraham as a possession that was deeded over. As a possession of the presence of the Hittites before all who went in the gate of the city. You know, this banking system that we have goes back to ancient Babylonia.
I wonder it's in there.
Because no one has any idea where that is now. Do they? Or
What?
the cave of...
Oh yes. That is. Oh yeah.
Sounds like the back of Oregon. More than it was worth.
Well, yes, you know, devaluation, mortgages, Leviticus 25 is to prevent inflation. Mortgages, amortizing mortgages, deeds, all of this stuff was all there in cuneiform. Interest rates, compound interest, simple interest. This stuff is old. Do you know why there was the first intermediate period in Egypt of 200 years of wildness that broke down the old kingdom? Because they went bankrupt. Building the 3 great pyramids bankrupted the old kingdom. And it took them 200 years to recover from the deficit. This is good to know.
That sounds like
This is good to know. It's good that this has all happened before. And you even have the Pharaohs explaining to their courtiers how they're going to handle the deficit. Didn't work. I told you before that This is the Middle Kingdom. This is after all at the time of Abraham. This is the time when there were no barriers in the Fertile Crescent. People could move back and forth freely from the Eastern Fertile Crescent, the Western Fertile Crescent. The Amorites moving into Palestine, no Egyptian control of Palestine. This is the Middle Kingdom. This is the 19th and 18th century BC. It fits perfectly with what was actually going on there. Okay. Before all of this gate of the city, after this Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave, and filled back Phillies and Beer, that is Egypt. Then came in the field and came to sit and were made over to Abraham's possession for birthplace. Okay. Obviously very important theologically. Okay.
John, you blew my mind. You really think that Saddam Hussein meant something different than what we are interpreting?
He meant I'm going to give up.
You think he really did?
Yeah.
Only if.
Well, no, you bargain. He's not a fool. He wouldn't be who he is, where he is, and what he is if he was a fool. What do you do?
He has to have say more than he knows he's
If
going
you're
to
in the
get.
Middle East in a marketplace, what do?
You ask for more than you know you're going to
Oh,
get.
by far, yes. You ask for everything.
And hope for something.
Ephron said what? I'm going to give it to you. But what did he mean? You're the richest man I know.
I'm going to gouge you.
Yes. You're going to pay enough to buy the whole land.
Well, there's something of that point there, though. This was traditional, the bizarre bargaining, but I think the point that should be made here is that Abraham did not bargain in the custom. Ephron offered a price which would be, like West Africa, the same thing, or some outrageous, outlandish price, because the fun is in the bargain, not in the deal. It's in the passing each other in the dark kind of thing until you finally get to and Abraham took all the fun out of it.
They took
400 shekels, fine, no problem.
Yes, and first of all, it showed his wealth and his power. Right? That he didn't
Actually diminished him by agreeing on the first part.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Oh,
Brought him down.
that's right. Because it's almost disrespectful not to bargain in the East. Yeah. And you go on and on and on, and you scream and you rage, and then when the deal
Haven't
is
you ever
done.
done that though to somebody and they have accepted and you think, well, I could ask for something different. Why did I ask for? Haven't done that? I have.
Yeah.
The thing with Sodom, and I think you're probably right, is that he doesn't understand the Western mind
No.
any more than Americans understand his. He doesn't understand that Americans don't live in that kind. We don't bargain like that. We go into a store and there's a
This
price
is
on
what I
it,
want.
we
That's
buy
the
it.
price. That's yeah. You know,
My final offer is my first offer.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's inconceivable to him that the American government stated his actual position in the first place, and it's still there. That's really the. But where did they get in the American government? Where did they get the experts? I hope that they understand a lot more behind the scenes than they appear to on the surface, because they seem to be missing it. He capitulated. We should be happy.
But he
Why don't
also
you
2
invest
days
it?
ago
Because
promised
they have
that
to understand
there would be
how
surprises.
the mind
That
thinks
they
of
were-
things.
That is a
I'm
surprise.
sure they do. That's why.
No, he
That's why
said
throughout the Arab world there's a lot more happiness.
And they were-
You can be sure that
I mean,
the king of Saudi Arabia is happy because he knows
I'm sure they
what?
would.
He knows them in so many words. It's
It's
just,
just a matter of time.
yeah. They have to figure out a way to do it that doesn't make sense. Yeah, they have to kill Saddam
Safe
Hussein or else figure out a way to end it that doesn't look like he lost.
Israel's will take care of it.
Yeah, Israel. will
Well,
do that.
see, that's what everybody's counting on. Let it finish the war in a nice, pleasant way that doesn't do injury to his reputation, and then everybody's counting on the Jews to come kill him later and solve the problem, because the Jews are the bad guys anyway, and they can be counted on to do that. Well, yes, and they stepped right into the breach and said, we will. So,
I personally don't think he's given up. I think he has some.
look, he wants to survive. He wants to have a country left. He'd like to have an army. He'd like to be a power after this is over. If you're sitting there and you're watching something that you spent $50 billion on being pounded into the ground, what would you do? So to be a great man in the East after this is over, he still needs what's left of that, right? He doesn't intend to go away. He doesn't say, oh, I'll kill myself. He's not Adolf Hitler, right?
Why did he attach strings to everything?
Oh, because he doesn't expect to get all those things. That's bargaining. That's Middle Eastern
No, but
bargaining.
all the while, he's getting everything taken away from him.
But he's
Well,
also
you're still
learning.
You're still going to bargain for everything you can get, right? If you can't get 20 things, then try to get 10. If you can't get 10, try to get 5. Abraham did that with Sodom. With the Lord, right? Well, how about 15? Will you go for 10?
See what somebody offers you to actually move it.
Yeah, it's inconceivable to him. And in fact, it's pretty inconceivable to the Middle Eastern countries generally that the American government's position is really its position. Though I think it probably really is the American
So when the
government's
Yankees were really celebrating, they really celebrated.
Yeah, because they know what it means. They've been through this before.
It dawns on me too that this is probably the root of King Hussein's problem here. He knows more about America and the Western mind than any other man in a similar position there, and he can't accept that this is the final position.
Yeah. He's the man who's been most damaged by this. He's the single individual that's been most damaged. Now Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and Yahweh had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham, he's following this theme of the covenant, the blessing, right? The triple blessing. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his house, who had charge of all that he had, put your hand under my thigh, and I make you swear by Yahweh God of heaven and earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but will go to my country and my kindred and take a wife for my son Isaac.
Well, Isaac must have been pretty old by then.
Well, but he's not just old. Putting the hand under the thigh means Abraham is what? More than feeble. This is a typical Amorite. He's bedridden. It's more than that. This is a typical Amorite phrase. Remember, that's where the life is. What's happening to Abraham? He's dying.
Oh, he's done.
He's dying. He's on his deathbed. Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and Yahweh had blessed him in all that he had. What's happening now? He's dying, and this is his last request. When the servant gets back, who is the servant's master? The servant already knows what's happened. Who is the servant's master? Isaac. Abraham is what? Abraham is dead. What time this is over?
And this seems to be the servant who would have inherited everything earlier.
Well, we don't know, because quite a bit of time has passed, but it could be the same man. The servant said, perhaps the woman may not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I then take your son back to the land from which you come? Abraham said to him, see to it that you do not take my son back there. Yahweh, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, who spoke to me and swore to me to your descendants of this land, he will send his angel before you and shall bring a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you'll be free from this oath of mine. And if the word oath is not a proper translation, it's curse. And the servant later on, describing it to Laban, says, my master cursed me, meaning what? He was under a curse if he went and took him back there. So the servant put his hand on the thigh of Abraham and swore to him concerning the matter. The servant took 10 of his master's camels. No, this isn't proof that the Yahwist is from the 10th or 9th century. Yes, camels were not used in the 19th and 18th century for crossing the desert. The use of camels here is intentionally to show Abraham's what? Wealth. Because the camels were like Cadillacs. Mercedes, something very unusual. It wasn't, if someday every man drives a Mercedes, to say that he drove a Mercedes today would mean that he was wealthy. And he took choice gifts from his master and rose and went to Mesopotamia to the city of Nahor. Now this is back to chapter 12, where they came from. Made the camels kneel down, and at the time of evening, the time when women go out to draw water, he said, O Yahweh, God of my master Abraham, Yahweh as God of the master, as God of the father, is very common. He's the household God, the God of, this is why he's called in another place the kinsman of Isaac. The patriarch's family is the family of Yahweh. Yahweh is the kinsman. He's the God of the father. And then he becomes the God of the fathers as time goes on. And that's where the phrase came from. Grant success today. I pray thee and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. Behold, I'm standing. Now, see, he's saying, grant covenant love to my master Abraham because he knows, look, this is a 3-month journey. He always telescopes it. He's not interested in the details of the journey. You fill that in. What does he know?
Right.
Abraham is dead by now. And he's saying, be faithful to it because covenant love, chesed means covenant love, that God is faithful and steadfast to a person always. Right? I am standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming up. She's standing. The servant is telling the Lord what's going on. Let the maid. This is asking for a sign. Drinking the camels also. Then I'll know that you showed steadfast love to my master. Before he done speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with a water jar on her shoulder. The maiden was very fair to look on, a virgin whom no man had known. Drew down the spring, and she says the right thing, and so forth. Verse 21 says, the man gazed at her in silence to learn whether Yahweh had prospered his journey or not. When the camels had done drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing half a shekel. That's a heavy ring. Where did he put this ring?
In her nose.
Yes, on her nose. 2 bracelets on her arms weighing 10 gold shekels. This girl is...
She must be strong.
How much does a shekel weigh?
Well, it depends on what you see. The problem with determining what a shekel weighed at this particular time is because there were different shekels, different weights, for different, we'll use the word of shekel, country shekel, eastern shekel, western shekel. It could vary anywhere from 4 ounces to as many as 12 ounces at this time. But that's heavy. It's having a pound of cheese hanging from your nose. She said, I'm the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. We were both strong, powerful enough for room to lodge in. The man bowed his head and worshipped Yahweh. He said, blessed be Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love, his faithfulness toward my master. As for me, Yahweh has led me in the way to the house of my master's kinsman. The maiden ran and told her mother's household about these things, which indicates what about her father?
Yeah, you tell him about
What's Bethuel's condition at this time? He's dead. Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. Huh?
Uncle, like you mentioned.
Yes, right. Yes. Laban ran out to the man. Literally, he raced out to the man at the spring. Why did he race out to the man as soon as he saw his sister?
She had all this gold.
He saw that gold, and he was on his way. Laban turns out to be a real used car salesman. in Genesis. When he saw the ring and the bracelets on her arms, you see his eyes lighting up? When he heard the words of Rebekah, thus the man spoke to me. He went to the man. After all, the father is dead, so he is what?
In charge.
He's the head of the household. And it's clear that the man wants what?
A wife.
He's come to buy the sister as a wife. And what is he thinking about?
How much can he get?
The bride price. What good luck. A rich relative turns up with a big bride price. Right? This is only the beginning. Remember that Yahweh doesn't waste much time telling you about people. He lets you see them in action and figure it out. By now, he's only said about 3 sentences in what? You're the all you need to know about Laban. Oh, and get this. This is really funny. He went to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. He said, "Come in, O blessed of Yahweh. Why do you stand outside? For I have prepared the house and a place for your camels."
In one
he just, yes, Solomon said, he just heard about the man about 10 seconds earlier.
No, I see what you mean by use parasite.
So the man came to the house. Laban ungirded the camels and gave straw for the camels to wash his feet and feed the men who were with him. Food was set for him to eat. He said, "I will not eat until I've told my errand." And he said, "Speak on," but they already know anyway. All right, we must stop. This story gets quite interesting. All right? Thank you all. It's fun.